Welcome to the Level Up Podcast, presented by The Ultimate Gamer, a show that features conversations with trailblazers, thought leaders, risk takers, decision makers, celebrities, athletes, and investors who are defining the gaming and eSports space. On Level Up, we take a journey into this dynamic industry and start to decode and reveal who and what's making news. It's about connecting, and it's about sharing the stories and vision of the people who make gaming and eSports a global phenomenon. And now, please welcome your host, student of the game, and connector to the eSports community, Tommy Knapp.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tommy Knapp, and this is an all-new episode of the Level Up Podcast presented by The Ultimate Gamer. On today's show, I have a conversation with Wim Stocks, General Manager and CEO of WorldGaming and the Collegiate StarLeague. He's absolutely a pioneer and legend in the industry. Wim and I started off talking about the punk rock scene in New York City in the 70s, and then about smooth flavors of fine tequila. We switched gears into the proper phrasing of eSports in the industry, and then moved on to pinball machines, Egghead, and early AT&T before Atari, Nintendo, and gaming as we know it today even existed. We veer into the world of Napster and people being prosecuted as criminals for downloading music, and then dive into GT Interactive, Elephant Entertainment, and Virgin Gaming. Wim then remembers the eye-opening moment of seeing kids pack up their Xboxes and PlayStations and driving hundreds of miles to a hotel to play together, and he started thinking about a better way to play: online. Online SDK, auto-validation, telemetry, and integration with publishers were all game changers for the competitive scene. There simply isn't enough space here to cram in everything Wim and I covered. This is a history lesson in gaming and esports. Listen and enjoy to Wim Stocks. Before, and I really thought it might be fun for me anyway, you've probably done this 1,000 times, but to take a walk down memory lane, because some of the stuff you've done is just so amazing, right? Like, you've been so involved for such a long time, from Atari, which to me is like what I grew up with. But before I did that, I wanted to ask you, because this is one of those things that, they're talking about just esports now, just the word esports and the way it's supposed to be written. But one of the things when I first got into the industry 3-4 years ago was e-games. People would cringe when they would hear e-games. But I was doing some research and I looked up on, one of the things that was talking about, it said you're currently the CEO of International E-Games Committee. And I was wondering what that was, and if you could explain that, because
I will explain that. That organization actually still exists. Now, it's not an active organization in the way it was. What it was a British group came together. Really, really great guy. Another close friend of mine that I've gotten to know through this business. But at the time, he was not involved in gaming. His name was Chester King, and he's one of the owners of the London Royal Ravens now. He started an Olympic structured support mechanism in the UK for gaming, and he called it e-games. The notion was we actually worked together on an Olympic format that took place in Rio when the Olympics were there in 2016, right? 2016. Yep. And in what he was able to do was to get the British government to anoint esports as a cultural pillar of excellence for the United Kingdom, and in that structure, got them to fund an esports event at the Olympics. In the when you go to the Olympics, the standard Olympics, all the countries have a house, and this particular year, the UK government arranged a palace right outside of Rio de Janeiro as their Olympic house, and in that house we had a Smash event. And what else was it? We had a Smash event and we had a FIFA event, and we put it on. Chester, under the auspices or the umbrella of the E-Games Committee, and that was their name. It wasn't necessarily it was esports, but we weren't really concerned about the the political correctness of the word, but that organization, I'm still very close with Chester. He is in the process of resurrecting that in a very different form. But that's where eGames came from, and it's not something that I would use to describe, our realm. Our realm is eSports. Our realm is competitive video gaming is what it is, and I have been gotten into the rabbit hole about what's the correct usage. Is it E capital S? Is it capital E small s? Is, whatever it is. And I wasn't trying to make an issue of it, but I liken it to no different than email. You write email, it's small e small m. It's not E capital M. And that's always how I if it's used the first word in a sentence, then of course the E is capitalized. But as a word in a sentence, it's the small e small s. And I've been, somebody was haranguing me on LinkedIn the other night about, well, who cares? And I said, well, you have to care. If you want this to have some sort of standards. And the Associated Press more than a year ago published usage standards saying small e, small s, and their exact example was just like email. You don't capitalize the M in email. So that's all it is. But it would be nice that. Just like sports isn't capital, there's no capital S in sports, and it's eSports. And I'm perfectly happy, however people are comfortable spelling it, but I do think it's important we establish some sort of, especially journalistic standards. So many people writing about it. The more standard we can have in this whole overall business, sort of my recurring theme when talking about esports, the better. It's more understandable. It's more clear. People get it. I can bring that sort of argument to just about everything in esports. And when there's more clarity, there's more understanding. When there's more understanding, there's more involvement. And when there's more involvement, we get big brands involved. We get big media involved. We spread the word in a way that people are clear about and can understand. So that's part of my normal soapbox I get on about esports.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that explanation, because for me, for someone like yourself who's been in it so long, like a lot of people, you have credibility, you've built that up over time. People just getting into the space, and when I started 3-4 years ago, I was forwarding because I was working in traditional sports, and I was getting a lot of stuff because I knew I had a pretty big network, even in gaming and esports, and so I was getting people that were sending stuff to me, decks, sponsorship, things like that I would then forward to other people that I knew in the industry. So these were from people kind of outside or just getting into the industry, giving them to me to get to people in the industry. And like I would go a week, 2 weeks without hearing from people. And I'd be like, listen, how come you haven't got back to me about that deck I sent? And I would hear right away, I wouldn't even look at that because it said eGames on the first page. And since it said eGames, I knew that these people didn't know what they were talking about. I was like, wow. So that was kind of my introduction. That's why I wanted to ask you. And again,
well, the funny thing, Tommy, I was just going to say you triggered something. One of the guys that hit me up on LinkedIn after I weighed in on this, he said, well, one of the great things about people who use eGames or capital S, right away they're opportunists. Right away they're not authentic. And I said, I hadn't thought of that. That's probably a really good way to identify someone who's in it. And there are. That's the other thing I rail about. There are so many opportunities in the space who, if we're not careful, will ruin the space. So we all, as those of us invested in this space, I don't mean necessarily monetarily, but just invested with our businesses and our careers and our passion. We got to protect against that. So this business got big because of its authenticity, and there are been no big corporations coming down saying this is what esports are going to be. Yeah, a lot of organization cultures obviously have a big, say they're the supreme beings in all of this, but ultimately this dynamic built from the ground up. You think about Twitch. Twitch built from the ground up. There was yes, Amazon owns it now, but they've also been very, very careful to not disrupt that level of that built it to the powerhouse it is today. So. It's all, and when there's authenticity like that, there's ownership. People feel like the space is theirs. This is right. I help build the space. I'm a fan. I'm a player, I'm an audience, I'm engaged. They all feel, everybody in the space who's been in it for a while feels that they had a hand in building this business. And how, you can't ask for anything more. You can't ask for any more passion than someone feeling ownership for something that they contributed to building. So that's a really cool thing about esports.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that's a great way to phrase it. I hadn't even thought about it that before, but I hear from people, and I would just think of them as the word endemic. They're endemic, but really, there's that sense of ownership, or almost like it's your child. That you've been involved in. Yeah, so there is a passion that you don't want people coming in and just screwing with it just because they see dollar signs. They see, like you said, they're opportunistic. So then jumping back, and this will be fun for me. Like I said, how many times you've done this, but I was talking to somebody the other day. My first introduction, as I thought back, getting back into the space, because I started out as a gamer. Zork was one of the first games that I played. I don't know if you remember that game. And then Atari.
I remember, but I don't remember what the what was it? Was it space?
It was a word game, and you got in. Yeah, and you kind of typed in, and then it would take you to, you'd have choices about which direction you could go. I think it was an adventure game, but there were no graphics. It was all basically typing in, but it was almost like a live novel, right? Like you could make decisions, and then once you made your decision, it would give you 4 of the choices, and you got to choose which path.
I remember the game name. I don't remember that as its premise, however. But that's great that you play it on. What did you play it on?
Oof, I don't know. That was, I guess, our PC back in the day.
Yeah, probably. Your Sinclair or your Apple II, Apple II or something.
I have to phone my dad on that one. He'd have to tell me. But then then we got the Atari. We got the first console. We had Pong. When you look at, to me, that's like a great, like when you look at the growth of gaming and you take Pong to where we are today. It's just amazing, right? So did you start as a gamer playing, and when, and then what was your pathway to Atari?
Well, I was always interested in gaming, but I started, well before there were video games, and well before there were PC games. My dad, as I was growing up, had pinball machines in our basement, and when I was 7, by the time I was 7, I could take apart and put back together the 2 pinball tables that were in our basement. And
wow.
And I loved pinball. I would steal quarters out of my mother's knitting basket and go to the bowling alley and play for hours. I would I was underage. I would just kind of sneak in and be unobtrusive, and I was 12, 13 years old playing in pinball machines in the bowling alley. I have to, certainly that had a hand in my interest in video gaming. And then when I was, seeing it firsthand was Pong, seeing it firsthand in a bar, seeing it, firsthand, putting my quarter in and going, oh my God, this is trouble. I'm in trouble. This is what I want to do. Right. So the young guys that I work with when we started this company used to call me the original eSports athlete, because I used to play Pong for beers. That's really
competitive. That's super competitive.
Super competitive. And they said, well, what about girls' phone numbers? I said, no, we never went to that extreme, but it was part of my sort of coming up in the at least from an interest and a passion perspective. And I was a math major in college. I went to 2 schools, a small school in the southern part of the state of Minnesota, Gustavus Adolphus, and then I finished at the University of Minnesota, and I had a math major. And in those days, programming was really still a fledgling sort of career aspect of being a math major. I had no idea what I was going to do with a math major. It just was something that came somewhat easy for me, not entirely easy, but somewhat. And I was planning on going to engineering school after college, but in my math major, you had to take programming classes, and I sucked at programming. Wasn't interesting to me. It was so detailed and so complex. It was my pea brain couldn't handle it. But it did sort of turn me on. We were programmed simple games, it actually sounds like Zork have come out of one of our computer labs, but that was what got me interested in, more computing, more technology. And once I finished school, I went to work for AT&T, and AT&T was at that point, this again, showing my age, was just getting started into computing and data processing. And I naturally navigated towards that side of the business. And my first 5 years out of college, I was part of AT&T, this whole new data sales group that was getting involved. We were selling Unix operating systems. That was a Bell Labs, owned by Bell Labs. We sold these super minis and super micros, and then struck a deal with Olivetti to make PCs. And that was how I got on the technology side, sort of on the platform side. But then not long afterwards, I went to work for a company that was getting involved in the distribution of software. Games were not a thing at this point. There was no Nintendo. N64 wasn't around at that point. But these are the days of computer land and business land that sold packaged software in dedicated Egghead. You might remember Egghead. Or maybe you don't remember Egghead, but they were very on the ground selling consumer computer software packages. And in those days, companies like Sierra Online, now part of EA, still a studio, a part of EA, we're making these very sort of rudimentary games, Gabriel Knights, and I'll think about it. I'll come up with a few more. But we got involved in the distribution side, and that was my introduction to gaming. We were in the broader computer realm, but then ultimately started focusing on gaming because it was an entertainment derivative, and the company that I was involved was an entertainment distributor, home video and music and things like that. So that was how it all got started. And I, in the early 90s, went to work for a company called Navarre that was in the music business, but got involved in this whole publishing side for gaming. And I started that division. We struck deals with developers to do distribution and publish their games. In the marketplace, we had CD-ROM was coming up in those days. Nintendo had started at that point. Nintendo, the early Nintendo SNES were getting off the ground. There was no PlayStation at that point. There was no Xbox. But our company started getting involved at least on the PC side. We were a huge part of CD-ROM growth. Because it was a music company, you're not going to remember this, but it was called enhanced CDs that had both on a CD, not only had music tracks, but also had multimedia tracks. And you plug it in your computer, you play the multimedia tracks, you plug it in your CD player, you could play the music tracks. That was becoming a very huge thing, and we were a leader in that whole dynamic.
It's crazy when you talk about that life, because I grew up with 8-track before the CDs, right? Yeah. So when you go 8-track, and then I think it was cassettes and then CDs, all those were very short-lived. Like when you think about it, I was growing up with it, so it was part of, but you don't see an 8-track. I don't even know if they exist anymore. There's no machines. And the same thing with CDs,
in museums. Yeah, in museums.
Right, in museums. But CDs, that was the technology. And you had that, what is it, the Walkman that you could run around with, and you had a CD and it would skip all the time. And that stuff is all completely irrelevant now. It's gone.
No, it's not. Well, and that's the thing, and we'll get to that in a point, but that's the thing. We as the gaming business, we had some great learnings coming from the categories like music and like video and like books. The notion of our space moving to all digital, it was preordained. It was, and the great thing about following, we were really the fourth category that went digital, largely because it was bandwidth. The games are huge files. They're huge amounts of code, and we didn't have the sort of bandwidth that could download games and enable games to be played online. But that obviously has now been well cared for. But in the early days, music, perfect, downloadable, videos, maybe less, books, obviously, snap to download. And now, that's the way most people get their book or purchase their book online, and they read it online. But the funny thing is about the music industry that when it started going digital, business did everything it could to keep it from going digital. You might remember when Napster, here, all these people getting involved in Napster. What did the music industry do? They declared everybody who's consuming Napster music through Napster as criminals, and they started prosecuting everybody. They had good for them. They had all the legal justice in place, all the legal dynamics in place to prosecute. But what a horrible thing. Here this whole huge audience of music lovers trying to get music in a more efficient way, and the music industry is doing everything it can to stop that from happening. Staring them in the face, this is what consumers are saying, we want this. And all the music industry did in those days was to call it, well, you're just a criminal and we're going to prosecute you. They did, as you might remember.
Right, of course, yeah. Well, because they did not, at that time, they didn't know how to monetize it, right? Their method of monetizing, their model was being totally flipped on its head.
Well, the dynamic in those days, if you were a music lover, you had to buy 12 songs. You had to buy a collection of songs. 8 of them probably sucked, and 4 of them were pretty good. But the music industry said this is how you're going to consume singles. Had come and gone at that point. They were trying to come back to cassette singles and CD singles, and the music industry said nope, we're not going to. You're going to buy this in a package whether you like it or not. And what what Napster did was, you don't have to do that. No, if you want a single, and now look at how music is consumed. Yes, they release albums, but you can buy every one of those songs individually. Such a better consumer experience, and there's the music industry is thriving, and it's sort of a major pivot and a major different way of marketing and consumption and the equipment that you need to do it all. But look at how big it's just a massive business, and so many. My point in this story is that we saw this time. I was very interested in it. We're not going to make those mistakes. We can't in my little view at the time was as a publisher, we know this is coming. Digital's coming. We got to adopt it. We got to get ready for it. But we're not. We're gonna do it the right way. We're gonna have a business model that's friendly and so that was my sort of step into the contemporary where gaming is now, and then of course the advent of multiplayer and online play is what has really fueled so much of the growth now. But it was a fascinating time to live through that and going, man, the music industry is doing everything it can to fuck this up, right. and thankfully learned. Took them a few years to. But they prosecuted the hell out of some of these individuals who had $200,000 fines coming because they downloaded a record off of Napster. I mean, it's kind of But
that was a little outrageous. I do in a way I do miss some of that. Like that time of like throwing in Van Halen was a big favorite of mine back in the day, and so throwing in Diver Down and listening from beginning to end. Like I don't do that anymore. It's like you said, it's just like everything. We can choose it, and it's all right there at our fingertips. My kids will never experience that, but so many Led Zeppelin 4, just so many like albums that I listen to. Like today, there are probably songs from artists that I will never listen to simply because I know 1, 2, 3 of their hits, but I don't know those other 7, 8, 9, 10 songs that like you said, I was actually forced kind of to listen to consume at that time. But some of that music today, when I hear it, it's just so nostalgic for me because I haven't heard it in 30 years because it just isn't, right. You won't find it anywhere except for, on that CD that's like really old. So anyway, so you were talking about then moving into really what's more, I guess, what you call mainstream of what gaming is today.
Yeah. So I, after all of my stints in the distribution side of things, I joined a company called GT Interactive. Still have a soft spot in my heart for GT Interactive. It in those days was an interesting amalgam of both a publishing model and a distribution model, meaning that the distribution side, we weren't only distributing our products, but we were distributing a number of different computer software lines. We were EA's distributor. We were Take-Two's distributor. We did a lot of distribution in those days for other companies because we had the infrastructure built. The GT Interactive New York-based company. But then got very involved in the publishing side. We at one point in time we were we had almost a monopoly on first-person shooters. We were the publisher of Doom. We were the publisher of Quake. Id was the developer in those days. There was a developer publisher relationship. The developer was Id. We were the publisher. I mean, we took to market. We worked closely with Epic in the days around Unreal. Now, of course, they're just an amazing company. Mark Rain, one of the founders of Epic, and I grew up together in this business, and he's got a lot more zeros after his in his bank account that I do. But he and I are close friends, and we did a lot with Unreal Tournament. That think of the title Unreal Tournament. That was 1999. And the competitive game was around, but here it was. There's Unreal Tournaments. It's in their title. So Duke Nukem was another first-person shooter. So we really got these were PC-based games. They weren't console per se. Console was both PlayStation had launched. Xbox hadn't quite launched yet, but was the next year, if I have it right. And we had a big hand in helping these console guys, get their momentum as well. So I remember fondly still some of my best friends in this business were a result of my time at GT Interactive. I was there up until 2007, and then started my own company called Elephant Entertainment. We were all online. I was this notion and my interest in digital and the emerging consumption around digital gaming was still early at that stage, but that was what I wanted to do. That's where I felt I could make a mark, and our business market. We were around for a couple of years. We went to raise money just as the market crashed in 2008, yep. And as a result of it, we were purchased by THQ. THQ at that point, now THQ doesn't exist, but at the time was the third or fourth largest gaming company in the world. Had based in Calabasas and the West Coast, had at one point had 17 studios. I mean, they were a massive company, but they had no online presence, and so they bought my company, Elephant Entertainment, to help them establish. We were small, and still at that point we were only a year and a half old when they bought us, but knowing that this was give them a lot of credit for seeing that we need to understand the online space. We need to understand. I had a small team of 15 people. It didn't go very well initially. Within 6 months, they fired most of my team. I ended up buying myself out of the last year of my agreement with them. Jump out the window. But in that, as this is all sort of de-evolving for me, I turned my attention to competitive video gaming. This is 2008, 2009, and starting to see the big eye-opening moment for me was hearing about these kids who would pack up their Xboxes or their PlayStations. They'd all go to a hotel in Boca Raton. They'd all check into a Holiday Inn, $100 entry fee. They'd land their Xboxes together and they'd play Madden. All physically. They all have to be physically in the same space, and started to sort of look at that. And I played Madden a little bit, but not good at all. But the whole dynamic was fascinating to me. And I said, well, why are these kids having to pack up their cars? They drive 200 miles. What happens? They lose the first round. They've checked into a hotel. They've spent gas money. They've lost $100 in the entry fee, and they got to turn around and go home. This is 2009. You can do that. We can do this online. Right. So that was and two young guys from they're U.S. based, but living in Toronto, had a really good idea, and it was the foundation of WorldGaming. And within, it took about a 15-minute phone call. I said, I'm in. This is exactly what the future is. So So that, and of course, in those days, where esports didn't exist, it was still a new dynamic. We actually, the foundation of this was really around engendering head-to-head play for money. Mm-hmm. And that was, these guys were gamers, they were smart, they weren't technology guys, but they garnered a really nice circle of help and support and development for an online tournaments platform. Took a couple of years to get it perfected and ready to go, but we were ready to launch in late 2009, and we thought, well, let's hold off. We need a big moment to do this. We didn't have all the money lined up that we wanted. We had a couple $1 million. We didn't have all the money lined up, and we went in, started talking to publishers about it. That was sort of my contribution to the business. I do, most everybody in the business, started talking to EA and Sony and Microsoft and Take-Two, to this day still owe them our lives, because they believed in what we were doing. It was a little early, a lot of convincing to do, but just as we're getting ready to launch in March of 2010, guy out of the blue reaches out and says, his name is Andrew Black, another really great guy from Toronto, running Virgin, and he said, we're hearing what you're doing. This is interesting. Have you shown it to Richard? And he said, Richard who? It's Richard Branson. This is. So, well, we don't know Richard Branson. He said, well, this is something that he would be really interested in. Gaming for money. Gaming, this head-to-head gaming for money. And I said, well, okay, great. A week later, we're sitting in Richard's office in London, having a conversation about. He said, I'll skip all the lead up, but he said, I want to buy your company for me. And he said, well, it's not for sale. We're just getting started. And he said, well, then I want to invest it. So, okay, we like that idea. And we took for a couple months to get through the negotiation. Finally, we couldn't do it with Virgin, the entity. We did it with him personally. And what it was a nominal investment for him. I won't disclose the figure, but as part of it, we were able to negotiate the use of the Virgin brand. So when we launched and it was a great, it really was a helpful brand in those days, getting us, we had no credibility. People didn't know us. WorldGaming in a new dynamic, playing video games for money, not gambling, to be clear. We also had to educate the market about skill-based gaming, that skill-based gaming is legal, but everybody misconstrued it as gambling. Another long story. But in any event, at that E3, June of, we were a huge story at E3 in June of 2010. We had a kiosk. We were last minute. They gave us prime space right outside the main entrance to the main hall at E3. And Richard was there. We had a armored truck completely tricked out with Virgin Gaming on it. We had Xbox, the guys who West Coast Custom, the guys who did all the Print My Ride stuff. They actually built out an armored truck for us with Virgin Gaming and an Xbox set up in the back. We had $1 million in a plastic box, fake of course. And Richard was there. We had a huge press release. We had a huge press conference. We had the party of the year at E3, all because he was part of the whole thing. So we couldn't have had a better brand partner, and a good one. Really, obviously a sort of a bit of a rogue brand. The model for Virgin, of course, was they attached their brand to things that they could turn on its head. Virgin Airlines, a very different experience, very cool sort of experience. Virgin Hotels, Virgin Banking, Virgin Mobile, all those were very different. Just taking sort of traditional models and then pivoting them or turning them on their head. It really worked out very nicely for us. It got a lot of attention, but we still, funny thing about it, we went into the E3. We didn't have a publisher relationship. We had a sort of promotional partnership with Sony around a game that they were trying to launch called Mod Nation Racers. It was 2010 racing game, almost like Mario Kart on PlayStation, and competitive. You could sort of you could compete with others, no different than Mario Kart. And that was our first. That was really our first big game. And we didn't have an integration. We had nothing. Worked out just okay. But for after E3, all I did was to work on publisher deals. And finally, we got to December of that year, and EA steps up and says, we really like what you're doing. We really think this is interesting. All through the fall, into the fall, this is a funny story. I meet with Andrew Wilson. Andrew Wilson at the time was head of development for the studio making Madden, FIFA, NHL in Vancouver, and the Burnaby studio. And so my first big meeting at EA is with Andrew Wilson. Now he's head of development at that point. There was another guy that was on the online side. He was responsible for their online SDK. And we sat at a table and basically hand shook on a deal to have integration in Madden, FIFA, and the game NHL. Battlefield was on the roadmap, but a little bit later. And our platform tech, actually got integrated into the OSDK that was installed in the online software SDK, the online software development kit. So when we had a match through the game Madden, you first thing you did, you're a player, you load up the lobby, the menu comes up. We had a WorldGaming lobby, and you click on that lobby, and what it did was it connected our player registration and their wallet to the game, and it enabled us to receive the proper game telemetry, player ID, time of the match, score of the match, all the sort of fundamental stuff, so we could auto-validate who won, who lost. And the funny thing in the early days when we launched this, people couldn't believe that we got the information. They would try and game us all the time. I said, well, no, I won that match. How do you know that I lost? I lost that match. It's because we're getting telemetry. So it was that sort of scamming didn't last too long with our platform. But our big first integration was in February of 2011. We launched in FIFA. It wasn't in Madden, FIFA. And overnight, the minute we turned on our lobby in the menu, we had 70,000 registrations overnight.
Wow!
So, whoa, we got something here.
We got something.
So, so then we were sort of mid. If the cycle of the sports, the EA Sports Sims, they all launch in the fall. So we were sort of mid-cycle for FIFA that year. It was actually FIFA 11. And we struck a 3-year deal for those 3 titles. We had integration for the next 3 years, and of our tech. We expanded to other publishers. We had a great deal with 2K on 2K. We worked on a number of other titles of theirs. Had massively serious conversations around Grand Theft Auto. But there's no real competitive aspect of Grand Theft Auto. It's more RPG. But we had Capcom. We were integrated on the Sony, on the PlayStation Live platform. We developed with Microsoft that connected our wallets to their wallet. Are you okay?
Yeah, something just happened. It just it was a loud like feedback, but it's over.
Oh,
It
okay.
was like 2 seconds. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, I'm taking you through the litany of our WorldGaming history, and where it all started getting very interesting is as we grew in stature, the Virgin name, while it was so helpful initially, became a hindrance to us. It was as we were pivoting away from the interesting thing about I'll just dwell on this a moment. The interesting thing about head-to-head gaming, our tech was beautiful. Our tech was really scaling nicely. We could get events with hundreds of thousands of people in our big event with Halo 4. We had 300,000 people in a leaderboard event, and so we didn't think when we first architected we'd ever get to something that scale, but it handled it with great aplomb, And we were even sort of amazed that we could have tournaments of that size. But as we grew, the brand. Well, sorry, let me just talk about head-to-head for a minute. We were getting nice engagement, we were getting nice scale, and we had a whole ranking, skill ranking system based on the ELO, the Microsoft ELO algorithm that not only tracked your win loss, but also tracked all the other players you ever played, and it was a good way to make sure that, and we ranked the players from 10 to 2. 2 was the low end of the skill set, 10 was the high. We even had rules in place. If you're a 10, you can't challenge a 2. There were degrees of challenges that we wouldn't allow. But the funny thing was, even as for $5 or $2 or whatever, the players set the wagers. We couldn't get what we couldn't scale was behavior. We could scale the tech, we couldn't scale the behavior. There was always a suspicion that am I really playing who they say they are on the other end? Are they really a 4? Is it really them, at the joystick? We couldn't scale that behavior as much as we put every other sort of governance in place to make fair matches. And but that ultimately was the reason we pivoted to, is now this is 2013-14, more tournaments, more regular competitions taking place. This is where the market's going. We've got to sort of de-emphasize head-to-head and start building more regular tournaments, leaderboards, all the different tournament types, Swiss tournaments. And so we pivoted there in 2013 and 14. What's going on? And this was the big moment where we're getting ready with EA to do a parallel FIFA event with the World Cup. World Cup in 2014 was in Brazil. Right? It was Brazil, or
I think it was Brazil, because then the Olympics were 2016 right after that. You're right. Yep.
That's right. So we're running. We're setting up. The gentleman who ran the FIFA product manager named Sam Cooper, great guy, now at Activision, actually very involved in the Call of Duty franchise. Where we worked closely with him for 8 months, getting ready to have this parallel. We're going to announce it 2 months before the World Cup. It was all really cool. We were so excited. We knew this was going to be a game changer for us. And at the final hour, get a call. We're talking to Sam on the phone. He goes, "Well, we need to make sure FIFA is okay with this." And I said, "Okay, by all means." Day later, Sam sends me a note. We need to talk. We get on the phone, and he said, "Well, we got a problem. When FIFA sees Virgin, all they see is an airline, and when they see an airline, they see a competition for their, they sell a $200 million a year sponsorship to Emirates. Emirates will not want Virgin name in any way, shape, or form attached to the World Cup." And I said, "Well, that's interesting. Can we white label it?" He said, "Well, no, ultimately, it's too late for any of that. We got shut down." So after 8 months of work, it was large. It was sort of the brand conflict. And the funny thing was, that was the first big episode and the first big example of it happening. And it started to happen a lot. So in the latter part of 2014, not a easy conversation and not a happy conversation, we ended up having to give the license back to Virgin. And we went back out in the marketplace fall of 2014 as our original name, WorldGaming. We, it probably is the best of all things that we were able to use Virgin Gaming for launch. Is still, we completely beholden to them to help us and believe in what we were doing and help us get launched. But then it was, now we're not beholden to a master license. We own WorldGaming, we own Collegiate, StarLeague front to back. So we are in control of our destiny in a way we wouldn't have been, especially now as eSports has grown up and do it. So again, I think we turned this into what initially I was concerned about losing, but turned it into a real benefit for our business and helped us build brands that we wouldn't have been able to build otherwise. So that's a good thing. So that gets us to 2015. In early 2015, we start a conversation with Cineplex about, they see the rise of eSports. They have movie theaters. These movie theaters sit idle 80+% of the day. Movie theater consumption's going down. It's watching films in movie theaters starts to decline because there are so many other means of seeing films at that point. Nothing compared to what's happening today, but it seemed like a really interesting partnership. So we started as a purely commercial relationship and partnership. We were going to program some of our events in theaters, made all the sense in the world. Quickly turned into an acquisition discussion, and Cineplex ended up buying 80% of our company in the summer of that year. Just prior to that transaction, we bought Collegiate StarLeague. Collegiate StarLeague was a little fledgling organization in Santa Monica, been around for a couple of years, only focused on StarCraft competitions between schools, and hence the name Collegiate StarLeague. But we bought it for, I won't disclose figures, but it was a very, very easy purchase for us. And still in those days, nobody knew what college esports was going to be, but we thought easy bet for us, to just given the financials and the economics were easy. And so we bought CSL. Then we get 80% acquired by Cineplex, and our very first event was the January of 2016, where we launched a sizable Call of Duty tournament with Activision's full support. And that was before Call of Duty World League was around. That was we were doing that. Of course, MLG was around and doing a lot with Call of Duty, but we always had this stratification sort of happening. There was the big pro side, MLG, and then we were a big for aspiring players. You're going to hear me talk a lot about that. That in those days we weren't even clear what our position was and what our value proposition is. What's happened the last couple of years with the huge growth on the pro side, it's also very much clarified who we are. We are the amateur side. We are a big funnel mechanism to help players who, if they're interested in getting involved in esports, we have a friendlier way to do it. We have a more accessible way to do it with not only our events and our programming, but our content as well. So in any event, in those days, and the funny thing about our first Call of Duty tournament, it was 1v1. Call of Duty is a team-based game, but they were also getting ready to launch Call of Duty World League, and they didn't want a team-based event to compete in any way with their announcement around Call of Duty World League. So we agreed. We worked closely with the team there. Said, let's do 1v1. You can play Call of Duty Lone Wolf, and amazing participation. We had over 5,000 players sign up. 1v1. Hardly a game mode, but it was easy. People, I could represent myself, don't have to assemble a team, and it was a really cool dynamic. Nade shot. Think of him now. He finished second in that event, and coming out of our event, I think he got signed. I don't remember who signed him, but somebody signed him right away. Obviously, a good player. Now head of 100 Thieves, and right. and the great thing about our legacy, we have hundreds of stories like that. Players coming up through our events, through our funnels, and it's not just the player side. Casters, Maven now used to do our events in the early days. Look now, he's on top of the world. Chris Puckett, they've all were casters in the early days for our events. So it's been this whole dynamic around our space. And for a couple of years, it was tough though. We couldn't really articulate who we were and what was distinctive about us. As all these pro activations, as I mentioned, all these pro activations have really helped us, clarified who we are, clarified for brands who we are, and it also has pointed out that what's missing in esports, there aren't funnels, there aren't organizational paths that are clearly understood to get from point A to point B, and as we work with the publishers, they value what we do. we are keeping and creating large accessible funnels for players to come in. They need a vibrant underbelly of play to keep the top vibrant and keep the top having value. So in most cases, when we have one of our big events, our Call of Duty event's probably the best example. Although we've done it with Rocket League, we've done it with Street Fighter, we've done it with the winning team, or the winning player coming out of our event gets a seat in one of the publishers' pro majors. So this notion of path to the pros is not, we don't just talk it, we walk it. You do well in one of our WorldGaming events, you do well in a Collegiate StarLeague, you finish as a champion in the Collegiate StarLeague season, you'll get you get anointments, and you get an opportunity to compete on the main stage. With last year, the winning team coming out of our event, a team called of our Call of Duty event. 2 months later, they're sitting on the main stage in Anaheim on the Call of Duty World League, the last Call of Duty World League major there was, because they're moving to the CDL structure. And they, there they are. Same thing. A month later, we did a big Rocket League event. Young guys from Toronto won our event, and 2 weeks later, they're sitting on the main stage at DreamHack in Montreal, playing against all the pro Rocket League teams in the RLCS. So that's what we've done, what we've tried to accomplish, and.
Yeah,
and,
wait. Let me interrupt for just a second, because I love that what you just said about funnels, and I hadn't really. When I look at it, when I first jumped in 3-4 years ago, I looked at it as the pyramid, right? I looked at the pro leagues, I looked at colleges being built out. High schools really weren't 3-4 years ago. They just are starting to kind of now. They started, but they're getting more into it. And then my kids at that time were 8, 11, so I was looking at how do they have that pathway? Because I was a traditional sports athlete. I actually played college football. And when I grew up, it was you played Pee Wee or Pop Warner, and then you went on and played junior high and high school, then you played college, and you knew and you had this aspiration to be a pro football player. And so right now, you guys are building out, like you said, that level. Where do you see that funnel underneath you? And are you guys helping develop that funnel underneath you? Because right now, there's so many programs that are starting to be built out in high schools, but even below that, kids, I keep saying my kids right now can't play in an organized Fortnite league, if you will. When I say organized, meaning they know when they go in, they have a chance to be the best at whatever age group they're at, or just get development and training at that age. They can play against other kids, but nobody's training or developing. It's all on their own. So what you guys are created that to the pro side. What about underneath you?
Well, we're not a big company. We're 35 people, and likely we're going to get even more efficient going forward. And all of our energy has been, on the WorldGaming side, when we do sort of separate our programming. WorldGaming is our tournaments and events, sort of tentpole events. WorldGaming platform, all online. We have dailies, we have weeklies, but our big events, we call them our tier ones. They start as qualifiers online, and then in any other time, they would culminate as a live event. Obviously, we can't do that in the time we're in. And our for the rest of the year, we have no live events planned unless something dramatically changes. And then on the CSL side, it's really leagues. We're operating leagues, schools against schools, colleges against colleges. Helping them get formed on college camps, the teams get formed on college camps, but then putting them into a schedule. The best model for us, even we're not the NCAA of eSports, but we act like it. It's league operations, league administration, scheduling, governance, the standings, content around it. Twitch, a big partner of ours in that regard. So WorldGaming has been more, the great thing about college is very understandable. 4 years, you're in college, you're going to school, it's a really nice package. People understand far more so than they understand WorldGaming. WorldGaming is, we've had events for players as young as 12. We do, we're pretty controlled about, we won't let, if you're a 14-year-old, you can't play in a Call of Duty event because Call of Duty is an M-rated title. So we manage it that way, but the the good news is we're establishing linkages on the side with high school formations. So a couple of companies you're probably aware of, we're in discussions with. I won't name them by name, but really we want that funnel as well. We want to help that linkage between high school players who are interested in gaming and esports to have a path to a similar thing in college. But a lot of that for us is helping these schools understand esports, not just from a participation perspective, but also the business of esports as a curriculum. Mm-hmm. We've helped a number of schools get syllabuses together. Is that syllabi? I don't know. Syllabi, I don't know. Syllabus together around what is a proper curriculum to develop for kids who are interested in gaming or at esports. Maybe they're not as good on the play side or the participation side as they are just wanting to be in the business. So right. So those linkages are really important. And as we to be authentic to what we do, we are helping these schools, the high schools, think about, okay, here's University of New Haven, or here's UCI, or here's Robert Morris. These are really good schools for gaming and for esports. They've been involved in it for years, and I get questioned all the time from parents. Well, where should my kid wants to play esports? And he wants to build a career in gaming. Where there's literally hundreds of schools that have done an amazing job of embracing it, offering programming. The other thing about college is, I get in this discussion a lot about, well, the athletic departments aren't necessarily seeing the affiliation, and we agree. We don't care for the schools that we're involved in. The athletic departments are where the money is, that's for sure. But we don't care where the teams come from, or where the impetus for participation is. Computer science departments, STEM programs. UC Irvine, one of the biggest programs in the world, it's all funded by the student life budget. So athletic departments are interesting because, again, there's a model that people understand. They see the impact of NCAA and what it does for collegiate athletics. But I had a little debate with Mark Emmert last year, president of NCAA, about where does esports fit in the collegiate athletic department, and he said we don't think it belongs where he didn't say it emphatically. He said we don't think it belongs in the athletic department. We're studying it. He was very respectful about the whole thing. But I said there's not going to be a debate because I agree. However, an esports program can be developed on a college campus. We love that. We support it. We want to be involved and help a school understand the importance. And early days, 2 years ago, some schools showed just a tremendous amount of vision. This is going to be a big. We've got to not only support participation, but we've got to get involved more in thinking about how to help our students create careers in esports. So your question's a good one. It's not just collegiate and up. It's high school. It's formative. Some of the problems about getting too young, or maybe it's actually a good thing, is that with prizing there are also legal ramifications. Like in some states, a 12-year-old can't play in a tournament where there's prize money. So a lot of those rules are legacy laws, arcane laws. In some states, sweepstakes, and sweepstakes have a whole another set of dynamics that come into play. We've lived every side of this, Tommy, from the legality perspective. But there's no, your question is spot on. We're all about the funnel and creating a funnel. The more another anecdote, I get this a fair amount. So, well, why is organization so important? Look how big esports got without organization. Why is it now so important? And it's more important because of this exact thing. It helps people understand it. It helps players who are aspiring go from point A to point B. Think about how big traditional sports are, and all of the organization that exists for someone interested in baseball, someone interested in football, or hockey. All the organization that enables them to. They really want to get good. They know how to do it. They know how to get from point A to point B. Esports still doesn't have that. It's starting to form. think we've had a really nice hand in that, but there's still a lot of work we need to do in order to get there. So it's a very valid point and a really important one for us.
Yeah, I know we got to tie it up soon, but I wanted to ask you. I'm just on your website, CSL website, and it says a fresh new look. So what have you guys got going on now? Like, obviously we're in an interesting time, but what is happening for the rest of this year? Big events and what is this fresh new look all about?
Well, we did a rebrand a year ago. The CSL logo and branding and just positioning needed an uplift and a refresh. So we did that a year ago, and it's largely now. We have 14 different leagues in the collegiate realm. Every league has 2 divisions: the elite division, Star, and then the open division, which is more intramural, more social, more casual. A lot of other dynamics at play there. This year, and this weekend, when will this be broadcast, Tommy? When will
probably mid-June, probably like in 2 weeks.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you, this weekend is May 30th and 31st. Our CSL Grand Finals, really our Final Four for our leagues, happened this weekend. We're originally in mid-April, which it's always been between the middle part of April and the end of April. The combination of each of our leagues and final schools. We had a big event planned at the HyperX Arena in Vegas. HyperX, being a great partner of ours, was supporting us in a great way. Obviously, had to cancel that with all the live events getting postponed. We had to wait a little bit because also the schools were shut down. Players couldn't get to their rigs on college campuses, so we had to do a fair amount of logistics to get everybody organized. Finally got that done. We're going to do an all online championship on Saturday and Sunday. 6 different leagues culminating. I just did a LinkedIn post with congratulating all the finalist schools. $230,000 in scholarships up for grabs, and we're super excited about it. All studio produced. The players are going to be. Their teams won't even be together. They'll be all separated. Counter-Strike, 5-on-5. Those players will be in separate locations. Our studio, separate. We have the casters involved. The backdrop's going to look very, very pandemic-like, in the production. But we're excited for it, and we'll have Twitch being a huge part of us. We're putting on the homepage. For 6 hours each day. So I mean that's expensive real estate these days. They're giving it to us as a part of supporting, being very benevolent about supporting college and supporting education and all the initiatives behind building esports at the collegiate level. They do this for all educational initiatives. So we're really, really thankful to them for what we're doing, and we wrapped in our sponsors, TikTok and GameStop and HyperX and Zaxby's and others that have really believing in collegiate esports. So that's a big thing for us.
Yeah.
That will be somewhat the official end of this season. And then our big next initiative is getting ready we go on a little bit of a hiatus for 2 months, planning our next collegiate season. We're already in market with our sort of broad view of our plans for CSL, but we start for CSL the 2021 season. We'll kick that off in late August. All our leagues will get started. We go into heavy registration mode for the month of September, and all of our leagues then kick off in October. So big plans for college and CSL this coming fall.
Are you how many teams are in the leagues now? And are you continuing to build, or do you get to a point where it's almost right, like the ACC has whatever it is, 12, 14 teams, and the Big Ten has 10 teams, and SEC has, I mean, I know you're not broken out and structured that way, but are you at 100 teams and you're like, okay, we're capping it, or are you just bringing in as many universities, colleges as that want to join?
We have this year, we've had 11,000 teams participate in our leagues. So
wow.
We have 1,800 schools, part of our footprint, and representing something like 100,000 student athletes that are participating in our leagues. We can, obviously the scale is enabled because of our online platform. Most of our seasonal play takes place online. We punctuate. We obviously have to rethink some of this going into the new season, but we punctuate our online events with live events, regional sorts of events. We also plug into big events for collegiate programming. We named DreamHack's collegiate partner earlier this year, whereby we will program all the collegiate events for DreamHack the next 2 years. Unfortunately, DreamHack's been impacted obviously by this as well. So I think our first one's going to be this fall. We're of course waiting for all that to get divulged, but and then we go our big beats. Then we go into playoffs in the March timeframe. The analogy to March Madness is a pretty good one. And then we have our championships, our grand finals going into April. A year ago, we were on ESPN we had Street Fighter final, and ESPN covered it. It was really cool. Our first big, moment in the sort of the traditional broadcast realm. This year we're doing all online, and as you know, these last 9-10 weeks have been so amazing for esports. Given there's been no sports, there's been no broadcasts, there's been no events. Esports are sports now. Seen on primetime on ESPN on Sunday afternoon, you're seeing Madden Last Chance Qualifier, you're seeing Rocket League championships, you're seeing Forza, or not Forza, but iRacing events, the simulator events. We've got a big Forza thing upcoming that I can't announce yet, but I'm going to shortly. So it's a really interesting time for us and for this industry. If you didn't know what esports was going into February, you do now because it's been everywhere, and it'll get subdued. As once traditional sports come back, people are not going to abandon watching baseball or watching the NBA playoffs or NHL, but we're the genie's out of the bottle. It's not going back in. Yep. And that's a good thing for us, in spite of how devastating everything is around us in this world. For us, for gaming, for esports, it's really elevated and illuminated what we're doing in a way. It might have taken us another 4 to 6 years to get there, but in the last 10 weeks, it's all been accelerated and in front of everybody's face. So great time for us, and a great time for everybody in this space.
Yeah, I've been saying that same thing, and everybody I've been talking to, I think the same thing, because I think people had plans, and you're talking about like some of the sim stuff. I talked to Darcy Lawrence from Torque Esports the other day, and he said they went from 20 hours of programming to 100 hours of programming basically overnight. And simply because of what they're going through, they had plans to go to 100 hours of programming, but instead of doing it in 6 months or a year, they ended up doing it like in 1 week or 2 weeks. It was just, and so everything has been accelerated, like you said. And I just think, I think we're at an amazing time. Everybody I've been talking to, I mean, I can tell how much passion. It seems like you're having a lot of fun in the industry.
I'm having a ton of fun. I probably should have retired a long time ago, but someone's going to have to take me out kicking and screaming, because I'm so enjoying what's happening in the space. And I think we continue to I'll pat ourselves on the back a bit. We continue to add value. I think we're doing we'll see. I think, but we're certainly, from the publisher's perspective and from our sponsor perspective, we're helping them understand the space. We're helping the space grow. We're getting and engendering more involvement. And to me, that's the most important thing. If you're an aspiring player, you can get involved in a WorldGaming event. You can, if you're in college, you compete in CSL leagues. Really helping build and not only understanding, but involvement in the space in a much broader way. So we're going to have a women's league this year in Collegiate. I'll give you a girl as a reveal, but it's the right time to be doing this. It's the right opportunity to do it. They're whole other side discussion about that. But we're enjoying our space. We're enjoying where we are and what we are, and I appreciate you even giving me an opportunity to talk about it all.
I'd like to thank Wim for sharing his time, experience, and knowledge with us today. Man, I had a lot of fun on this one. How often is it that you get to speak to a legend? I don't care what industry it's in. And on top of that, he genuinely has to be one of the nicest people in gaming. I learned so much and only wish I had more time. Thinking about having him back as a regular guest if I can get him on monthly. Anyway, you can listen to him again now, and you can also find timestamp segments of the show, links to Wim's social pages, and more information about his company, projects, and media in the show notes. If you enjoyed our discussion, please let us know. Continue the conversation with me across all social platforms. Become a part of the Ultimate Gamer community today by subscribing at ultimategamer.com. We release new shows every day of the week, Monday through Friday, so be the first to join us for some outstanding upcoming guests and or dive back into the library of previous Level Up pods to hear from some of the most brilliant minds in the space. Experts like CEO of Skillshot Media, Todd Harris, VP of Partnerships at Complexity Gaming, Ashley Chalk, and Head of Strategic Alliances at HyperX, Wendy Lacotte, just to name a few. You can find all of these episodes and more on the Ultimate Gamer website, on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your pods. And finally, please like, rate, and review the show. It helps us reach the gaming community to spread the word and share the wisdom of our guests, as well as some of the most thought-provoking stories in the industry. Shout out, as always, to the Ultimate Gamer. I look forward to being with you on the next Level Up Podcast.